All right, for the last few days, we've been talking about different types of rotation or transformations. We talked about translation, which means going up, down, left, and right. Then we talked about reflection, which is the mirror image of a shape or a point. And then our third one for at least Unit 6, Part 1 is rotation. So I'm going to go over some vocabulary first. Rotation, if you remember, just in general, means to make a turn. So we're turning. And you have to know the difference between clockwise and counterclockwise. So clockwise, going back to the old school clock, is following the directions that the hands of a clock move, so to the right. And then counterclockwise is opposite of the clock, so to the left. So we're going to practice what that looks like on paper. Now, when you turn something physically, does anything happen to the size of it? Well, it shouldn't. It doesn't grow, doesn't get smaller. So we call that preserves preserves congruence. And when you turn something, does it stay facing the same direction? Well, if you turn anything, no matter how many degrees, is it going to look the same as it did before? Well, the answer is no. So it does not preserve orientation. Okay. Now you have to know the difference between clockwise and counterclockwise, but you also have to know how many turns. So 90 degrees means one turn, and I'll talk about what that means here in a second. 180 degrees is 2 turns, and then 270 degrees is 3 turns. And the only reason we don't talk about 360 much is because it takes you back all the way to the beginning. So let's look at number 1 through 3. Can you tell me which turn it is? So if you remember back for the last week or two, we've talked about the difference between the two shapes. Now, these obviously look different, but it's actually the same shape, just rotated. We'll look at the letters. These are A, B, C, D, E, and these have the primes, A, B, C, D, E prime. They have the little apostrophe. Remember, the primes tell you which one is the new one. So this is my new one. This is the old one. Well, think about it. So if I look at this first one right here, how many turns would it need to take to get from this original to the new one? And what I mean by turns is you can kind of think of it like quadrants. How many quadrants would I need to turn this shape to land on this one? So if you look at it, quadrants, it goes from you'd have to go from quadrant 2 to quadrant 1, then to quadrant 4. How many turns was that? That's 2. And 2 turns is 180 degrees. Well, which way did I turn? I turned to the right 2 times. So that means it's 180 degrees clockwise. Well, if I tried to go counterclockwise, how many turns would that take? Well, this would have to go from 2 to 3 to 4, which is also 2 turns, but it's 180 degrees counterclockwise. So you have to kind of look at it from both directions. If I look at number 2, okay, again, which one is the original, which is this one, and which one is the new one? So I'm going to label it ON. So how many turns would it have to take to go clockwise? Well, if it's in quadrant 2, it would take 1 turn to the right to go to quadrant 1. So that's 90 degrees clockwise. If I tried to go counterclockwise, how many turns would that take? Well, if it goes from 2 to 3 to 4 to 1, that would take 3 turns, which is 270 degrees counterclockwise. If I look at number 3, this one to this one, so now this time it's, this is the old one, this one's the new one. How many turns would it take to get from, going clockwise from this one to this one? Well, from 1 to 4 to 3 to 2, that's 3 turns, which is 270, but clockwise. To go counterclockwise, it would only need to go from 1 to 2. That's 1 turn, which is 90 degrees counterclockwise. So you just have to be familiar with counterclockwise, clockwise, and how many turns. Well, truth be told, you do need to know that, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow. But today we're going to practice, can you do it yourself? So if I look at number 4, what we're going to do is we're going to use tracer paper, and I'm going to use the corner of it for this question, so I can put like 5 questions on this one piece. What you do is you lay your tracer paper on top. We're going to trace the X and the Y axis. So with your pencil, you're just going to color the Y axis and the X axis, being as steady as possible, and we're going to trace the dot. Now, this one is telling me to rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. That means 1 turn to the left. So think about a turn being, when I turn this like I guess a windmill, I'm going to hold my pencil here at the origin. I'm going to turn it one time to the left. So we're going to go counterclockwise. And notice the lines start to move. It's whenever the lines line up again that I've made one turn. Well, that was one turn to the left. So look at where the dot landed. What would be the coordinate of that dot? That is -3, 2. And that's where my new A would be. So we label it A prime. Now, if I lost you, let's do that again. This time I'm going to trace it again. I'm going to use this corner of the page, and I'm going to trace my y-axis, trace my x-axis, and put a dot. So this time we're going to go 270 counterclockwise. That means 3 turns to the left. So I'm going to think of it like a windmill, hold my pencil in the center, and we're going to go once. When they line up again, that's 1. Twice. When they line up again, that's 2. And 3 times. 3 turns to the left. Now look at where the dot landed. It landed at 3, 5. And that's your answer. So let's recap real quick before we get too far. Clockwise means to the right. Counterclockwise means to the left. 90 degrees is 1 turn. 180 is 2 turns. And 270 is 3 turns. So let's do that again. I'm going to use another corner of my patty paper. I'm going to trace my y-axis, trace my x-axis. You have to do this as steady as possible. And the dot. This time we're going to go 270 clockwise. That's what the CW means. 270 clockwise means 3 turns to the right. So I'm going to use my pencil as the holder. And we're going to go turn it 3 times to the right. Once, when they line up, twice, and then 3. So it lands in the first quadrant, which it should, and it lands at 2, 1. So 2, 1. It's pretty repetitive, but let's keep practicing. Again, I'm going to use another corner of the patty paper, so that way we don't waste too much. And it's going to trace the y-axis, the x-axis, and the dot. This time it says 180 degrees counterclockwise, so we're going to go 2 times to the left. So once, twice, and it lands on the first quadrant at 1, 4. And there's your answer. We're going to do it again, and I'm going to use the center of the graph so that way I can use the whole page. So you can fit about 5 questions on this one piece. On the assignment, you actually may be able to fit more because I made the graph smaller. All right, this time we're going to go 90 clockwise. So we're going to put our pencil in the center. That means 1 turn to the right. So once to the right, and it lands in the third quadrant. That's -1, -4. So far, so good. Last one. And again, I'm probably going to have to use a second page. And I'm going to trace this quadrants, or the axes first. And then the dot. This time we're going to go 180 clockwise. That means 2 turns to the right. So pencil in the center. Once. Twice. And it lands in the fourth quadrant. It lands at 2, -5. And that's your answer. So just keep in mind, clockwise is to the right, counterclockwise to the left. 90 is 1, 180 is 2, 270 is 3. And the reason why we don't talk about 360 is because it ends up back at the beginning.